They say barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. Well, I'm barefoot and pregnant in the garden. Planting a summer garden while growing a baby isn't easy, but it is possible with a little strategy and a lot of grace. My name's Alexa, and I'm a gardener in Northeast Ohio, and I am currently 37 weeks pregnant with my third baby. Although it's kind of like my first again because this baby is coming 12 years after baby number 2. When I found out I was pregnant near Thanksgiving, I knew that I still wanted to grow a summer garden, and I had a lot of time early on to think about how I was going to actually do that. Because knowing I was due at the end of July, which is the prime gardening season, I knew that I was gonna have to do things differently and also reset my expectations for what I was going to be capable of doing this year. I wanted to grow a garden because it's important for me that our family has as much fresh produce as possible, and that includes vegetables, herbs, and fruit. Now, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to grow as many things as I typically do. However, I did pick the staples that were going to produce and be ready for harvest in the months after I deliver the baby. So for tomatoes, for example, I planted all of my tomatoes knowing that those aren't really going to be ready for harvest until late August into September. And I will be having this baby at the end of July. So that will give me some time to recover and then be able to come back out into the garden with the baby and be able to put up all of that fresh produce. So with thinking through some strategies like that, I was able to plan my garden, figure out the best time, plant, and then harvest based on where I was in my pregnancy and also postpartum. Through all this, I have had to manage very realistic expectations and also reset my plans because things that I wanted to do, they just didn't happen, or I just wasn't going to be able to do them based on my capacity. Overall, I feel a lot of peace with the imperfections of the garden this year. It's not quite as pretty and maintained and beautiful as it normally is, but it is still producing food for us. It's still producing flowers and berries, and we'll still have all kinds of great harvests this year. So I hope you join me in this video as I am pregnant and barefoot in the garden as we talk about how to plan for this sort of season of life. So if you know that you're going to be pregnant or have a newborn baby in the summer months during kind of the peak of the garden season, then I encourage you to start as early as possible to get your garden going. And what I did is I started all of my seeds indoors in the months of February and March, and I got a lot of things planted at the very beginning of April. Even here in Northeast Ohio, which is in Zone 6, and before our last frost date, I was planting all kinds of things outside, such as onions and peas, lettuce, greens, broccoli, cabbage, kohlrabi, all of the frost-hardy crops. And getting all of those spring crops in very early on in the season was a really big benefit because I still had a lot of my mobility at that time. And now, as we got towards the end of June and now early July, my mobility has significantly declined, and me being able to go out and plant things right now is kind of hard. It's hard to bend over. However, because I started all those crops very early on, I have already harvested, or I am currently harvesting, a lot of those items. And I will have those things harvested and put away for preservation, like through fermenting or freezing, before the baby is due. So it all goes back to timing. Once you know your due date, you can go backwards and figure out your planting timelines. What do you have time to start seeds for indoors or transplant outside? And then your harvest windows. And how does that correlate to when babies do? Next, let's talk about some low maintenance crops that are easy to grow and you don't have to do a lot of work after you initially plant them. To be able to plant and then harvest with not a lot of work in between is a really great approach when you have limited mobility and limited time. So in this row right here are potatoes, which are a great set it and forget it kind of crop. Potatoes don't really need much maintenance other than once you plant them, you're gonna wanna put straw over top and kind of mound it. And then from there, as long as the potatoes are not showing or coming out of the soil, you don't have to do anything until it's time to harvest. Squashes are also very low maintenance. Once you direct sow the seed in the ground, the plant, as long as it has good compost and was well fed, will produce lots and lots of squash for you. A variety like this basic green zucchini is really nice to grow because, again, the plant gets really big, and once these flowers start to produce fruit, we will have tons of zucchini. Without a lot of maintenance. Pole beans do a great job of trellising themselves, so as long as you give them something to climb up on, they'll do all the work. And when it's time to harvest, all I have to do is stand up underneath my vertical trellis here and pick the beans as they're ready to be harvested. No bending over for this belly. One of the things that has made my gardening season a lot more enjoyable this year while being pregnant is having vertical growing solutions such as these green stock planters. With these planters, I was able to plant all of my spring greens in one location, and I didn't have to be constantly bending over to plant them or maintain or pick the greens. Now at this point in the season, us being in July, a lot of all of my leafy greens are now done. They've gone to seed and I'm starting to pull things out. But at this point, I'm still able, even this far along, to replant these with things like beautiful flowers, herbs, or if I wanted to wait a little while, replant some more greens for the fall growing season. And the added benefit is it's right out my back door, so I don't even have to walk very far. When I was ready to have a salad, I would just come out, pick my greens, go back in, and I was still able to get the benefit of gardening, having my own fresh produce without any extra work of having to walk all the way out to my garden. And then just on the other side of the green stalks are a raised bed and some containers that I have some more flowers and things in. And having this little garden space right around my house has been really filling because not only am I growing greens and leafy things, but I'm growing all kinds of beautiful flowers, which while I may not be in the vegetable garden as much, having all of these annual flowers such as zinnia, sunflowers, marigolds, poppies, coleus, amaranth, snapdragons, dahlias, all in this space right behind me. It's giving me a chance to look at something really beautiful, kind of get my gardening fix, bring cut flowers into the house. And again, I'm not really spending much effort or energy trying to go out into the larger part of the garden and do flowers and vegetables and herbs and all of the other things because it's right back here out my back door. So herbs are another really low maintenance crop that are great to grow when you're pregnant. So also right behind my house is my herb spiral. And in here I have all kinds of herbs growing. Sage, oregano, mint, chamomile, fennel, rue, and borage, and some other odds and ends mixed in. And this herb spiral is really well established. It's probably been in here for about 6, 7, 8 years, maybe even now. So I have a really good perennial herb garden established. But it's great to already have this in place before getting pregnant because I have had to do basically nothing in this space all season except come out and harvest. And that's the great thing with perennial herbs. Once you have them planted and established, they're just gonna keep coming back year after year. So if you're in a season of life where you're not able to garden as much, whatever it might be, having herbs established somewhere at home, whether it's in containers or in ground, is really great to have and a way to bring fresh food in on the daily. I can use these flowers to make some great chamomile tea to help me relax and unwind this evening. While tomatoes do require some maintenance, you could also practice a no maintenance approach, which is what I am doing along this entire row of tomatoes here. But specifically, cherry tomatoes are going to be really easy to grow. Look, we already have fruit forming here. And as long as you have some kind of support system, they won't be flopping all over the place. And I have done 0 trimming on any of these, no pruning this year, and the plants all look very good. All I do on this fencing here is as these tomatoes grow, I just come in and I weave them through the fencing. And again, I'm not bending over far or stretching. I'm just literally coming in and weaving these branches through the fencing as they are growing up. Now in typical years, am I pruning my tomatoes? Yes, I'm making sure that there's lots of airflow between all of the branches, and I'm making sure that they're well trellised. But again, going back to giving ourselves some grace, we don't have to do everything perfectly and by the book in seasons of life where we just don't have the time or the capability to do it. And for me, okay is best this year. And so far, okay has been really good because my tomatoes are not showing any signs of sickness. Everything appears to be well supported on the trellis without tying anything up. I'm actually really liking just weaving the branches through this fencing here. It's been really easy, and I think I'm gonna keep doing this next year as well, because not having to bend over and actually tie everything onto the fence, I mean, why do that if the weave is working? I'm trying to work smarter and not harder. If you're ready to dive deep into all of the home garden planning steps, I invite you to check out my video series on how to plan your home garden. In the video series, I take you through all the steps that you can do in January, February, March, April, May, June, July, and August to plan and prepare for your home garden. I break down steps of easy tasks that you can do little by little so you're not feeling so overwhelmed and be able to get harvests much earlier on in the year. I give you seasonal planting tips, lots of information on seed starting, different ways to mulch your garden, how to maximize your time for busy people like me who still want to garden but have to plan ahead. All of the home garden planning playlists will be linked in the description below. And if you're an expecting mama or no one who loves to garden, make sure you share those with them as well. Following these tips are gonna help you grow your best gardens yet, even when you're under some more challenging circumstances. And if you like to follow something written, I do have a 12-month guide on all the same topics for planning and planting your home garden that are available on my website, bloomandwiltgardens.com. So be sure to check that out. And part of that strategy of not working harder is to also well mulch all of my gardening beds. So as we were planting the garden this spring, which my sons helped me plant a good amount of this garden on Memorial Day weekend. With every bed that we amended and planted, we also put straw down. It can be straw or hay or another type of mulch. I just wouldn't recommend fresh wood chips. But the mulch is going to help suppress the weeds. So the more mulch that you can put in your garden beds, it could even be dried grass clippings, the more that you'll have weed suppression. And if the weeds are suppressed, there's not really a whole lot that you need to do for most plants other than just let them grow. What I fight with the most during the summer months are all of the weeds that grow across the garden. Now, a lot of my garden beds, since they are well mulched, I don't have a whole lot of weeding to do. But all of my garden pathways are grass, and around the garden beds, the grass does get tall and it requires pulling or weed whacking. So really what we're dealing the most with in the garden in the summertime is trying to maintain and calm down all the grass. But as long as the garden beds themselves are well mulched, it does help quite a bit. Now, that's not to say I don't have areas where the weeds have gone up through the mulch and have gotten a little out of hand. But again, I'm taking it with grace and saying, well, the plants are still growing. We're still gonna get a harvest. If there's weeds all around it, that's okay. No reason to stress out about it too much. So some tips I have for pregnant gardeners or people who have more limited mobility in the garden. If you can use raised beds, that's going to help you limit the amount of bending that you have to do. Now, I do have a mix of raised beds in my garden as well as in-ground garden. Eventually, I would like to have more raised beds, but it just wasn't in the cards for this year. So for the raised beds, it is easier to maintain those because they're higher up off the ground, which means I don't have to bend as far. But for a lot of my in-ground gardening spaces, like this garden bed behind me, I have had to accept the fact that there are just going to be weeds because it's harder for me to come out and weed them. But even though there are lots of weeds, there's still a lot of beautiful flowers growing. Okay is going to be good enough this year has just been my motto, but even the okay has been really great. When you do need to get lower to the ground, having a garden stool or a little bench that you can sit on is also super helpful. I have a little garden stool that I can sit on or kneel on, and that helps me get closer to the ground to pull weeds or plant. When I was 7 months pregnant, I was planting all of my tomatoes, and that little garden bench made all the difference. And never worked during the heat of the day. It has been so hot here lately with temperatures in the 90s. And for a very pregnant woman, that is very hot, and these barefoot feet start to get very swollen. So I definitely avoid coming out into the garden during the middle of the day. If I'm going to do any garden work, it's going to be in the morning or in the evening while it's much cooler and the sun is not as intense. Another great crop to have in your home gardens are any type of perennial fruit bushes or trees. I have several types of perennial berry bushes that have been established, and this year has been a really great year for berries. So behind me I have raspberries. Over to my right I have a thornless blackberry bush. On the other side of the property, past my greenhouse, I have 14 blueberry bushes that are producing right now beautiful, gorgeous blueberries. And I have a very productive patch of strawberries as well. This has been the best strawberry year I can ever remember since we moved to this property 9 years ago. And because all of these things were already established, I didn't have to do any work of planting the bushes this year and getting spaces prepared. We have just been thankfully harvesting all of the berries as they're ripening in different seasons. So the sooner you can get your berries and fruit trees planted, the better. Also, knowing when it's time to call it quits is okay too. So I have 2 specific in-ground planting spaces in my garden that are covered with a silage tarp. It's just a really big piece of black plastic that I have completely covered the soil with, and that is so it keeps all of the weeds out, the soil stays well protected and moist underneath, because I was not going to be planting in this space this year. And actually the plan was to build new raised garden beds in this area. My husband has been so busy with getting things prepared for our baby and putting together our new nursery, there has just been zero time for any extra garden projects, which is okay. So instead of letting this space get completely out of hand, because I knew that I wasn't going to plant it, I just went ahead and put a silage tarp over top, and that way the soil is covered and it looks nice. Except for maybe all of the dried grass clippings from when my sons recently came in, mowed the grass around the garden. The dried grass clippings went on top, but I could always use that for more mulch. So as we wrap up our time here today in the garden, I'd like to close with managing expectations. When you're pregnant, you have the greatest gift of growing and carrying a new life. And it's okay if your garden is not perfect. Ow, 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 ow. And being barefoot in the garden also means getting attacked by ants. Ah! I just stumbled on an ant colony. Now my foot is itchy. This was just crawling all over my foot. Okay, now that I am away from the ants, having the perfect garden is no longer a priority. Growing this new human life or caring for the little one upon you is the most important thing. For me, this has just been a season of letting go my perfectionism in the garden and just being okay with good enough. There are so many places across my garden that I am a little embarrassed of, and I just feel like I can't believe that all of this has gotten so far away from me. When in years past, I have been so on top of keeping such a nicely maintained, nearly pristine garden, along with raising my 2 sons, having a full-time job, but still having time to come out and work in my garden. But having the limited mobility this year has just been, hi kitty, has just been a challenge in itself. But I also know that this isn't forever, this isn't permanent, and there's always next year that I will be able to have a much more well-maintained garden. Even then, setting this realistic expectation of a year from now, I'm going to have a 1-year-old, I'm gonna have a little toddler running around the garden. That's gonna come with its own set of challenges of how much time will I actually be able to spend out here. And you know, that garden season may be very different too. And anytime you're able to get help take it. Having my 2 teen sons be able to help me in the garden this year has been invaluable. Even though, of course, not everything is maintained to the point of my normal standard, my boys have done a great job, especially early on in the season, with helping me get garden beds weeded and amended, planted and mulched. Just getting the garden in and planted was just my #1 goal. I knew that once June and July rolled around that my limitation was going to be pretty high in how I was going to be able to maintain things. I knew that that was just unrealistic. My big boy, who I wouldn't be able to do all this garden work this season without your help. Thank you. Mwah. And his brother, who is now that is July 9th, and we are just 3 weeks away from the due date. That is absolutely true. My ability to come out here and do much of anything is pretty slim to none. A lot of the garden beds are mulched, but even some of them are just completely unruly. The plants didn't grow like I expected them to, and you know what? It's okay. I've even missed some planting windows, like planting my corn. I wanted to plant corn Memorial Day weekend. We weren't able to get to it, and then we had some really cold weeks in June. It was very strange. It got really hot right after that, so pretty much the whole month of June was a wash for really doing any garden work planting because of how cold and then how hot it was. Last week, my 14-year-old Anthony, he came out and planted the corn seeds that I had put for him to do, and I gave him all creative freedom on how he wanted to plant them, and he did. But now it's been over 7 days and I've only seen 2 corn plants sprout. The seeds I used were from like 2023, so they were a couple years old. I don't think we're gonna have corn this year. That's because I gave him old seeds to use, and now we're just kind of getting to a point where if I planted corn, it's kind of a toss-up on if we're actually gonna get a harvest this year before our first frost date comes. I have made peace with, we won't have corn, but we are gonna have lots of peppers, we'll have beans, we'll have tomatoes. Tomorrow I'll be harvesting all of the cabbage, have potatoes. We had broccoli already earlier this year. The onions got overtaken by grass and weeds, so I'm really not sure if I'm gonna see an onion harvest. I'm thinking probably not. The peas finally made a recovery after our really cold and then really hot days. Peas are all rapidly coming on right now. We had asparagus. Overall, because of the planning that I did on the very front end of the season, we've been able to get a pretty good harvest of things so far, and we'll have a great harvest in more towards the fall when the tomatoes and the peppers and some of the squashes all come to fruition. Instead of holding this sweet kitty, I'll be holding a sweet little newborn baby boy. I just want to encourage other pregnant or busy mamas that your garden doesn't have to be perfect to feed your family or feed your soul. I'd love to hear from you in the comments what you are growing in your gardens or some of the struggles that you're having this garden season, and how we can all encourage one another to always just continue to do our best. Love the garden that we have. I wish you all the best, and we'll have baby boy here with us soon. Take care, friends. So I hope you join me as I am pregnant.
Mom!
Ow!
Hold out!
The nipples?
Yeah. Mom, you have big nipples.
Well,
You're gonna have to...
what do you want me to do about my nipples?
Mom, you got big nipples.